Good morning. Today I'm going to give you a brief commentary or an introduction to, or you can call it a general criticism of Henrik Ibsen's Idol's House. Uh, Let us begin by saying that throughout the 19th century, women were still very much viewed as possessions of their husbands. But by the turn of the 20th century, early feminists were beginning to question the limitations imposed on women as passive mothers and homemakers. So they were seen as only mothers or homemakers, people or humans who belong only to home or to the house. Although playwrights like Henrik Ibsen depict marriages within a society that expects wives to be submissive, of course, submissive to their husbands, he, and by he I mean Henrik Ibsen, he shows how damaging such relationships can be. His depiction of women as independent human beings, capable of holding down jobs outside the house and running their own lives without the constant guidance of men in Idol's House in this play. This view was considered shocking when it was published in the later part of the 19th century. Ibsen persisted in advancing such views until women were given opportunities to live freer, to live more freely and more satisfying lives. Although the prevailing cultural tradition of the society at that time, I mean the 19th century, although this tradition had been that men were trapped by marriage, and even here in the Egyptian society we have this view that we as men are trapped. Once we get married, we become trapped by marriage. The feminist viewpoint of Henrik Ibsen asserted that it is really women who were thus trapped and not men. This play, Idol's House, depicts a woman trying to break free from the restrictive patriarchal relationship she comes to recognize she has with her husband. This woman character, this female character is called Nora. By today's or contemporary standards, Nora's rebellion may not seem so stunning or so striking, so surprising, no. But in 1879, in the 19th century, it was considered absolutely immoral to suggest that women might abandon both their husbands and their children, as Nora is going to do at the end of this play. By showing Torvald's romantic marriage to be an empty dream, of course Torvald is Nora's husband. By showing his romantic marriage to be an empty dream, it is false, a false dream, Ibsen thus smashes, crushes, destroys the conventional romantic Victorian ideals of the what we call little woman, and the angel in the house. Little women and the angel in the house. Nora's leaving of the house at the end to pursue or to search for self-fulfillment challenges the society's whole concept of the sanctity of marriage, of the institution of marriage, and thus marks an early call for female emancipation or female freedom. The fact that the law at that time actually prohibited a woman from borrowing money The law at the time prohibited women from borrowing money. Despite this fact, without Emil's, of course, relatives' consent, without the approval of Emil, who is relative, a husband or cousin or someone, is very important. This fact is very important to recognize, to pay attention to. Noura lives in a patriarchal society, a male-dominated society that will not be easy to combat alone. Okay, it's very difficult to combat this biased society against women. It is an incredibly brave action she takes at the end, leaving the house at the end of the play. Indeed, she does. A Doll's House, again, this play depicts the marriage of Noura and Torvald Helmer. And in this play, the protagonist is Noura, not Torvald. She is the protagonist of the play. Torvald, her husband, treats Noura as a plaything, a doll, a doll's house, a doll, rather than being a person, a fully grown person. And when she acts independently, how? By raising money that is needed for him to recuperate from a bad illness, to recover from a bad illness he had in the past. She collected some money. Indeed, she borrowed some money from someone. When she does that as an act of independence, of course, this is against the laws of the Norwegian society at the time, because the play takes place in Norway, and it is against the morals held by the society as well. So this is considered as a change. It changes their whole relationship, husband-wife relationship. Noura had to forge, Tuzawir had to forge her husband's name to get the money. Not only this, to forge her father's name as well. And the man with whom she made the deal, the man from whom she borrowed the money, someone called Krogstad, an immorally indecent person, Krogstad, who commits forgery as the play unfolds. Krogstad discovered this, her husband discovered this, and tries to blackmail her husband Torvald. So Krogstad attempts to blackmail Torvald based on the discovery of this secret or this kind of forgery. After meeting the widowed Mrs. Lend, we have another important female character within the course of the play called Mrs. Lend. And she acts as a foil to Noura, someone who is playing the role of exposing or contradicting Noura, the major protagonist or the major character in a play or a story. So, after meeting the widowed Mrs. Lend, she is a widow, Mrs. Lend, an early love, of course, of Krogstad. Krogstad destroys the evidence of Noura's forgery. This evidence, this proof, is a bond on which there is a signature of herself, not her father, because she committed forgery. So he destroys this evidence and he sets free the Helmers to show himself worthy of the new life he's going to have with Mrs. Lend, his old love. However, Torvald's reaction when he discovers Noura's secret makes her rethink the relationship, the kind of relationship they have, and decide to leave her husband. Why? For what purpose? to reclaim her humanity and identity, to regain something that has been lost for decades, almost her entire life. Nora's desire for macaroons, for example, because throughout the play, she keeps on eating or having macaroons, a type of dessert, secretly, away from her husband, without her husband's knowledge, because he bans her, he doesn't allow her to eat macaroons. Okay? But she does that secretly. So her desire for macaroons suggested that she is still maybe a child who needs to grow up. She is, after all, a willing doll, a doll who is willing to be a doll or remain a doll for her entire life, unless she takes action against that vision. So this eating of macaroon is a kind or a symbol of independence or her freedom, secret freedom that has to be revealed to her husband, Torvald, who, her husband, represents the entire society. He stands as a symbol of this conservative society of Norway at that time. So she virtually chirps because he calls her a skylark, a small bird known as a skylark. He calls her, and read about that. You have to read about that. You have to read the entire text at home. He calls her skylark, and so she chirps or twitters, to zakzik. Okay, as she throws, this is symbolic of, or is represented by, her throwing off her things around at home, leaving them, her things, whatever they are, leaving them for servants to pick up, okay, to collect them. Shyly, on another hand, she shyly flirts with her husband and childishly, like childs, she plays with her children. She plays hide and seek, by the way, in one of the scenes. And so, as her husband calls her, she is a little lark, even worse than that, a little squirrel, a little feather brain. Look how humiliating and insulting descriptions he uses against his wife. So her playful world, this playful world of hers, is in stark contrast to Torvald's cautious, ordered world of business. He has a world of business of his own that is so ordered, organized, and he is so cautious to keep or maintain this kind of business in the bank. He has a high position in the bank and expecting even more. He prefers this sanctuary of his study. He considers his study, Maktabu, as a place of sanctuary, a sancted place, okay? A place that is sanctified. Merely using his wife as an occasional entertainment. He uses his wife as a mere entertainment to play with, okay, to use for his own entertainment or satisfaction. The fact that he will not even allow Nora to read his email, he has an email box outside the house, and he never allows her to open the box, okay, looking at this box, with a key which he keeps for himself, the only key to this email box he keeps. This shows how far he has kept her apart or away or isolated from the entire outside world. So, why? For what purpose? So, she will remain under his total control, total domination. However, Torvald's world is depicted to be as remote and cold as the setting itself. You know, the setting of this play, each player has a setting, time and place of the action. The time setting of this play is Christmas, the time of Christmas, Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. And the locale or the place in which this play takes place is Norway, a city in Norway. So his world, I mean Torvald's world, is depicted to be as remote, very far, and cold as Norway itself. It's a strict world of men, a law as well, in which women are allowed no social or legal rights. By contrast, on the other hand, as Nora develops mentally and intellectually throughout the play, we see her being related to the warmer, more passionate climate of Italy. Why Italy exactly? It is to Italy that she takes Torvald after showing defiance to the male world and obtaining the necessary funds. When he was very sick in the past and she tries to save him from death, the doctors advises her that he must be taken to a remote, cool, special place in the south where he can feel the warmth of the sun, okay, a warm atmosphere or climate. So she had to raise funds so that they can go to Italy and spend some time there for his recuperation from illness. This place, I mean Italy, it is an Italian place in which she even learns a dance, a kind of dance called tarantella. A tarantella is an Italian dance. And Ibsen uses this dance to indicate her feminine growth and development as a woman. This dance stands as a loud expression of Nora's development, Nora's loud expression of freedom or liberty from men's control or hold. When Nora threatens to burst out, to explode as a woman while dancing the tarantella, because the tarantella is a type of dance that is so vivid with passion and movement. Okay, try to watch some videos on tarantella on YouTube. Okay, when she explodes as a woman while dancing the tarantella at Christmas Eve, Torvald feels compelled to control her, his doll. Though his attempts become ineffective, he fails to do that, and she continues dancing wildly. Okay. It is a growth witnessed in Nora that he will not be able to comprehend or prevent. It is something now out of his control. So Nora wins our sympathy as readers and audiences. How? Through her, there is another facet that we should cover. She is so generous. She wins our sympathy by her generous spirit and because of her, of course, dictatorial husband, the kind of dictator she has in the house, this Torvald. So she gains our sympathy. Her generous nature is indicated from the start, from the very beginning. As she overtaps, gives too much money, okay, as tips for the porter, okay, and earnestly tries to assist her old friend, Mrs. Lind, getting a job. Her generosity is again noticeable with others and not herself. Even the crime, because society considered this as a crime. Her borrowing of money from a man, a woman to borrow money from a man is considered as an illegal and an immoral action at the time. So this crime she has committed was done to save her husband's health. for her husband's sake. And so this is very, very generous. He had thoughtlessly, he had thoughtlessly refused to raise the money they needed for the trip to Italy, which the doctors recommended, okay? Preferring instead to risk his own life, leaving his wife and, at the time, his newborn child without a husband and father. Nora's marriage is, a relationship which is based on inequality. Relationship which is based on inequality. Her selfishly spirit or Nora's marriage is a relationship based on inequality. This is a very important point because one of the major themes of this play is gender inequality. Torvald, he selfishly runs their lives according to his own impulses, his own whims, Nazawetu, and doesn't feel it necessary to consider his wife's feelings or emotions. Nora is aware that their marriage is based on appearances, superficial appearances, and realizing that she may need something to keep Torvald's interest in her once her beauty is faded. Okay? What Henrik Ibsen, is telling us through this is that a true marriage needs a deeper bond than Torvald and Nora have managed to create so far. Nora has invested a great deal in her marriage. She has sacrificed so much for the success of this kind of marriage. Far more than Torvald realizes. He can't realize this. But she has invested unwisely and will be forced to recognize this fact at the end, too late. On the other hand, if we want to tackle another character, Mrs. Lane, for example, Mrs. Lane can be seen as I told before, a foil to Nora, created within the dramatization of this play to explore or excavate the character of Nora. Okay, so she is a foil to Nora. We can say that while Nora married in the past because of an idealized romantic image of love, Mrs. Linde, first married because she felt responsible for her family. So she married for pure financial reasons. She gave up her true love, Krogstad. Remember? She gave up Krogstad's love. Why? For the financial security of a richer man. She married a richer man who subsequently, look how this is ironic, subsequently this richer man loses his money and dies. And so she, at the time, lost everything, leaving her to go out into the world, this harsh world, and work to support her mother and younger brothers, and herself, of course. However, she has gained self-education through the difficulties she has passed through. She is now a woman who can bind herself to a man, attach herself to a man, Krogstad, she respects without losing the kind of self-independence or female independence. To have an equation, based on equality. Her misfortune, these past events which are so horrific to her, her misfortune has allowed her to discover her own hidden capabilities, and she may be the role model. She is a role model that Nora should follow. Surprisingly, it is Mrs. Linde who proposes to Krogstad. She proposes to Krugstad as she persuades him that they need each other equally, on an equal basis. Indeed, they exhibit the qualities on which a true marriage should be based. What are these qualities on which true marriage should be based? Mutual honesty and respect, rather than concealment and falsehood, a life of lies. So, if we come back to Noor again, she finally learns to reject, resist Torvald's doll-like image of her, to defy this image of her as being a doll in the house, as she comes to realize at the end that this is the only way she can reclaim her true identity. Torvald helps her reach this decision by his reaction to her dealings, her secret dealings with Krugstad. He completely condemns her. He doesn't want to take into account her noble motives. She did that for himself. And he only considers how his image in the society will be affected by these wrongdoings she has committed. So Nora realizes that she too has been the victim of a romantic dream. Having expected her husband to stand by her, she expected that, and even nobly take the blame alone. She took the blame all alone on herself from the society. She now realizes that such a wonderful thing, the final scene of the play, or the final act, she reveals to Mrs. Lane that she is waiting for the wonderful thing to happen. What is this wonderful thing to happen? Is his or her husband's appreciation of her efforts to save himself and this household. A wonderful thing is only a mere imagination. It turns to be a mere imagination. It is untrue. It cannot be obtained or achieved. She needs to enter the real world so she can discover how it operates and make up an identity for herself. She admits her own fault in having allowed first her father and then Torvald to use her, because she was passed on from father to husband as a doll, to use her as a plaything, as a doll. But she really feels that their faults, are worse than hers. She condemns them even more than herself. Why? For expecting her to fulfill such a role, and for not allowing her to discover her own independent identity. Eventually, Torvald promises her to change, but this is in the final scene. But she rightly believes that this can only happen if she leaves the house. A change is only possible on condition that she leaves the house. This change is supposed to occur or to happen to herself, to her identity. Thank you.